Mary Custis Lee, was related to the Washington family, that Washington family. So her father built the mansion that you see on top of the hill at Arlington National Cemetery. It's got a great view of Memorial Ridge going down the way, the bottom of the hill. The Kennedys are buried with the eternal flame, Jacqueline Onassis, Bobby, and Teddy. So it's got a great lineage. Like I say, you can trace American history forward from that time forward. So during the Civil War, Robert E. Lee had graduated from West Point, a top graduate in his class. He had a couple of classmates. One you know of, Ulysses S. Grant and Sherman. But one people don't really know about is Quartermaster of the Army, General Meigs. It was Meigs' assignment to collect taxes. And in so, he said you have to pay taxes in person. So Robert E. Lee, who was fighting for the South, couldn't pay his taxes in person. They foreclosed on the property, and Mrs. Lee's nice rose garden was dug up, and they started burying Union soldiers right outside the window. So Mrs. Lee was very distraught over that situation, left the Custis Lee mansion, never to return again. So there's a lot of turmoil in this time, and even afterwards, I mean, I think it was, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, the Lee family finally got paid for that property. So it's something to see. If you haven't been to Washington, go. If you haven't been to Arlington, go. If you haven't been to the tomb, I highly recommend that you do go and see the tomb. So the history of the tomb begins almost 100 years ago in 1921. We didn't have a tomb at that point, and England and France had one. The Arc de Triomphe in France, that's where their unknown is, and now there's unknown grave sites around the world, or a monument, shall I say. So a Hamilton Fish senator proposed legislation that was passed into law, and so they started the unknown. So the unknown soldier of World War I was laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery, November the 11th, 1911, or excuse me, 1921. A side story, I'm not a history major, but a lot of infantry officers are history majors, so we were doing some ceremony, and somebody said, what's the significance of November the 11th? And I was kind of standing off the side, and our captain says, Leonard, you don't know what this is? I said, no, sir. So he starts giving me a lecture on the 11th day of the 11th hour. In 1911, we signed the armistice to end World War I. So here we are at 1921. We finally got a tomb, and the tomb that you see today is not what it was back in 1911. This is it. Notice no upper block. So the upper block was cut from stone out of a quarry in Colorado. And I ran across an interesting story about the tomb, and so you had an architect, a sculptor, I guess, who had a working model of what he wanted. But the interesting one to me, since I'm married to partial Italian, is the picture really, brothers, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing their names, but they were the carvers of the tomb. So, but you know their fine work if you've ever been to the Lincoln Memorial, the 19-foot tall statue of Lincoln sitting in the chair. That's the Piccirilli's fine work. The lions outside the New York Public Library, they did those too. So it's very skilled artisans and craftsmen. I think. Anyway, so the features on the tomb, when you're seeing the tomb, and you'll notice there's these wreaths on the side. Those are laurel wreaths, but you'll notice they're upside down, like so, instead of like this. Laurel wreaths are usually significance of victory. The reason they're upside down on the tomb, and there's 6 of them because there's 3 more on the other side, sign of mourning. So since there's 6, there's the 6 major campaigns of World War I is what it represents. So when you're looking at the inscription on the front, here rests in honor, glory, an American soldier known but to God. And it's kind of hard to see. The words American soldier are bigger font than the rest of it. And you're also, when you're standing on the plaza, you're looking at the back side of the tomb. The front side has the 3 Greek figures: peace, victory, and valor. Peace holds a dove, victory holds the laurel branch or palm branch, and valor, the only male, holds a broken sword. Key dates, we'll get into that a little bit, but it kind of starts, your mind starts going because it's been such a long time. 1937, midnight, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier guarded 24 hours a day. February 7th, 1958, first Tomb Guard badge is awarded, and we Tomb Guards really value our badge. We have these odd traditions and so forth. We don't like people touching our badge. We don't like all kinds of, all manner of things. But when you're a new man down at the tomb, they're hard on you, and they don't let you touch it. But anyway, here's my badge ceremony with the battalion commander down in the day room. A little bit thinner at the time, I believe, and a lot less white hair. So some more of the key dates. 58, World War II and Korea were interred. It was a double internment. So we had World War I by himself. World War II and Korea were interred together. It just takes a long time. When I say that this is a global effort, it is truly a global effort. So how they got selected. So from the major cemeteries around the world, we picked 4 of each. And then that usually some high-ranking officer or a medal winner, usually a Medal of Honor or Distinguished Service Cross member, selects the unknown. So, and there is a lot of jockeying about as far as making sure no one knew. And that is, you know, it's interesting, the process, but it really, they were trying to ensure that they had total anonymity. But along comes Vietnam. We have here's a Kazon. Notice 2 Kazons. Anybody know what a Kazon is? Kazon is the artillery, like a buckboard, a wagon, and a carriage. In Civil War times, they'd take the cannon off, throw dead bodies on, remove them from the battlefield. So you have the double Kazon, and it's Kazon platoon still functions to this day at 3rd Infantry. It's kind of a neat assignment. Well, it's not kind of, it is a neat assignment, but you're going to be around horses and you're going to be washing, feeding, shoeing, all kinds of stuff with the horses. And they have that, and they have the riderless horse. Usually for state funerals, they'll have the blanket of the officer, say he's a 3-star general, they'll have 3 stars in it, and his boots are in the stirrups backwards with his saber. He's a fallen comrade, so his boots are in the stirrup backwards, signifying he's a fallen soldier. So back to the Vietnam unknown. So veterans groups from the Vietnam era started clamoring to get an unknown, and I can't blame them. You know, they feel when they came back from Vietnam, they felt shunned and disrespected, and a lot of times they were correct. So there was a big push to get a Vietnam unknown. So they always had these action reports or after action reports of what happens, and where they found this Vietnam unknown. Only had one. They didn't have the normal 4 or 5. They exhumed some bones, because that's all that was left, and took him to I think it's Pearl Harbor, and brought him to the States, and then buried him. I was there. 1984. I got fortunate enough to get an invite. Come to find out, later on, well, we have this after action report. We'd like to exhume the body and do a DNA test. The DNA test was a positive match from the Blasey family. So they exhumed Lieutenant. Now, this is an odd thing. This happens sometimes after death. A guy will get promoted. So at the time of his death, he was a lieutenant. So I saw lieutenant and I saw captain. So captain being the next rank up. So anyways, a U.S. Air Force pilot, helicopter crashed on the side of the hill. They did the exhuming of the body and DNA test. It matches. They moved him to his home outside of St. Louis, and he's in the Jefferson Barracks Cemetery outside of St. Louis. Thank goodness, because then his family has closure. I can't, if you guys can imagine your husbands, your sons, uncle, daughter, they go off to war because they're patriotic and they're defending their country, and they disappear, and you don't know what happened to them. That's a pretty heavy burden. And I'm glad that the family has closure. So now we just have a representative crypt. So we have the 3 crypts, World War II, Korea, and then the center crypt, and I failed to put the inscription on that. But from there, we're going to move on to the Sentinels. And the Sentinels are there just as a living gesture or of honors to the unknowns. All the unknowns are Medal of Honor winners. They all were presented with medals of honor. They all have a folded flag. So if you're in the military and you pass away, they usually give your flag to your wife or a relative. Since we don't know who the relative is, the President of the United States receives the flag. So the President in turn hands it back to Arlington, and if you ever go to the tomb, you'll be watching the tomb, watching the guard change. There's some steps, some chains. Behind you is the Memorial Amphitheater trophy room, and you can go in there and see the flags and their medals of honor. You're right in here. You go in there, and you see all sorts of awards and stuff from like the Star of India and a cross from England. But one of the neatest ones I've seen is an Indian chief gave his war bonnet. Chief Plentycoots gave his war bonnet, which was a high honor to an American soldier. Ken, I don't know where you dug that up, but great job. I'm telling you, he's the man. He's the man. He's the one keeping me afloat. So I can only speak to my time at the tomb as far as going down there in the training. The training consisted of a 2-week QBY period where they look you over and say, yeah, you're the right height, the right build. We're going to stick you on first, second, or third release, and the release are 24 hours a day, usually running about 26 hours. So it's first release the tallest, second release, so forth, and then here's Ken.
Let me interrupt here.
Usually
They are always doing that to us.
Yeah.
We're the shortest group.
Yes, they're the shortest group, but I'll tell you one thing about third relief. Third relief, they always brought things out to the extreme. Whatever it was, we are going to be the best, and to be truthful, they were, because they had something to prove.
Great back pedal.
They have something to prove, and that's what I love about third relief. They get a little carried away sometimes, but yeah. You're down there, you start your training, and you usually start with your manual of arms, and to see if you're proficient with your manual of arms using an M14 with a bayonet. And from there, they start looking at your uniform, tightening your uniform up, making sure everything's just so. And they'll check you on that, and then they'll start kind of spoon feeding you into the rotation. But before you start in the rotation, you're doing things like taking the flag down at the end of the day. Everyone's leaving the cemetery. They're end of the day, and folding the flag, bring it back in. So it's hot in here. Anyway, then they start working you into the rotation, usually at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. So you get used to being out in the crowd. And then as you get better and better, they'll start moving you into the rotation. In my time, we had not very many sentinels. I walked one relief an entire summer with 3 sentinels and a relief commander. So there's 2 guys, the relief commander, and there's 1 guy downstairs pressing his sleeves, redoing his breath, respit signing his shoes. So that's a pretty quick turnaround, in the summer heat in Washington. So another odd story is that the Washington Post did a little piece on the hottest jobs in Washington. We were number 2, but because these are winter wool uniforms, the number 1 job was a welder who worked under the streets of Washington. I said, man, that guy's got it bad. I just thought I had it bad. So that's the way it works. And nowadays, they have really ratcheted up the standards, and I really like the direction of the new Sentinels. I'm referring to them as Super Sentinels because they really turned up the screws on the new Sentinels. Took me 3.5 months to get my badge. We're talking over a year for these guys to get their badge. So the attrition rate is quite high. They really know their stuff. My tomb guard test, the written test, was only 300 questions, but you have to know it verbatim, commas, periods, all that sort of stuff. It's kind of serving me well for something I'm trying to do today. Anyway, I also liked the permanence of Arlington, and I liked when the weather was the worst. That's when I liked being out on the mat. It sounds strange, but it's true. I can remember having frost nip, and that's right before you get frostbite, where you lose feeling in your fingers. They turn white, and you're starting to kind of wonder whether or not you can move your rifle from one shoulder to the other. Something I've failed to mention was the rifle's always away from the tomb as a sign that you're guarding the tomb. And 21 is a big number. Why is 21 a big number? It's the highest honor. We give a fallen hero 21 gun salute. So we live in the world of 21 at the tomb. So it's 21 seconds, face, move your rifle to the furthest away from the tomb, 21 again, 21 steps, stop, face again, 21, 21, 21, 21. So you're doing that the entire time you're out during daylight hours. So this is the winter uniform, trench coat. I love the trench coat, low maintenance. not much brass to speak of. It's just polish your buttons, put on your belt, out the door you go. So something you ladies will find interesting, we have 3 badge-holding females. I believe they're all military police, and my wife missed her time because she would have been down there with me and probably trying to do something, but anyway, and I also like the heat a bit. One time, it was after hours, and the plaza is kind of this pink granite. You notice we wear sunglasses a lot because it just gets blinding outside. So it heated up that granite, and a cold front blew in, mercifully, and rained. So when it hit that hot granite, it was like a Frankenstein movie. It fogged up about knee deep. It was the most peculiar thing. I hadn't seen it at all before. You see that. I talked to the sentinel that was on duty. Remember, there was a Air Florida jet crash in the Potomac River, just short of Key Bridge, I think. And I talked to the sentinel. I said, well, what'd you hear? He said, I didn't hear a thing. He said, that's how bad that storm was. So also, in the wintertime, all the leaves drop off the trees. And so you can see the Potomac. So I would like to look at the Potomac, and you can see chunks of ice floating down the river. I mean, it's the nature there, it's there. You just have to look for it. And every now and then we'll have the squirrels gets a little bold, wants to eat flowers off trees and that sort of thing. We just let them do what they're going to do. And if can't relate a story about a squirrel crawling up on him. So after I left the tomb, I went to the Pentagon tour office and gave tours to the public. So these are big mock-ups of the Medals of Honor. Did anybody know that there's 3 different Medals of Honor? There is, and you can spot it easily. The Air Force has the wings and the lightning bolts. The Navy has the anchor, which holds the pendant. And the Army's over here with the traditional eagle. So we have, at that time we had over 2,000 Medals of Honor awarded. I don't know what the number is today, but I did shake the hand, one of the most recent Medal of Honor winners, and he's quite a man, Staff Sergeant Bellavia, and he's a great public speaker. I feel fortunate to have met him, and it's always something to meet one of these Medal of Honor winners, because usually they're gone to history. They're usually posthumously awarded. Speaking of Medal of Honor winners, I kind of skimmed over it, and I don't even know what kind of Texan I am, but when you go to the tomb, you take a tourmobile, if you're smart, because it's 1.5 miles from the visitor center uphill to the tomb. So take that, you get a lot of history, a lot of background and so forth. So when you drive in front of the Memorial Amphitheater, as you're driving up, you might want to look to your left and you'll see a small chain barrier and a small sidewalk. Yeah, this would be on this side up in here. And there rests Audie Murphy. So we do a thing at the Old Guard on the big holidays, Memorial Day and Veterans Day, of flags in, so everybody gets an American flag, but Audie got 2. The Texas flag. So there's some interesting things to know about the tomb, and there's quite a few rumors out there, but I just want to leave you with line 6 from the Tomb Guard's Creed, and that's, my standard shall remain perfection, and we are the most picky people. And it's almost a, Ken, would you say it's a bit of a weird, quirky thing? We're always, that's not right. Or, you know what I'm saying?
It is a passion.
It's a passion, and people, it takes a while to lose. Did it take you a while to lose the face? Because we're always straight-faced. So people think that we're way too serious. And it's true, it's a serious endeavor. But it took me a while to lose the face, and it got to the point where I could smile again. But that being said, does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.